What if I told you that the future of American power does not depend on Washington, Wall Street, or even Silicon Valley? What if I told you that the most important battlefield of the next global conflict isn't a battlefield at all, but a series of quiet mining towns, vast deserts, and shipyards on the far side of the world, a place most Americans barely think about, Australia? Because right now, without headlines, without speeches, without public debate, the United States is turning Australia into something unprecedented. America's fortress in the Pacific. And the reason isn't missiles. It isn't submarines. It isn't even China's navy. It's minerals, money, and a silent war over who controls the future of the global economy. Most Americans think of war as something loud, explosions, troops, jets screaming across the sky. But the most important wars of the 21st century are quiet. They happen in boardrooms, shipping lanes, trade agreements, and supply chains you never see. Every time you unlock your phone, every time an electric car glides past you in silence, every time the US military deploys a drone, a satellite, or a missile defense system, you are touching the front line of a new kind of war. A war over inputs: lithium, rare earth elements, uranium, nickel, cobalt. These are not just resources. They are the building blocks of clean energy, artificial intelligence like modern weapons, economic growth. And right now, one country has a stranglehold over most of them: China. For decades, the United States made a bet that economics would override geopolitics. That trade would bring stability, that supply chains would always remain open. That bet is now collapsing. To understand why Australia suddenly matters so much, you have to understand how the US lost control in the first place. Back in the 1992s and early 2000s, America outsourced everything. Manufacturing moved overseas. Mining became dirty. Processing minerals became someone else's problem. China stepped in, not because it was more innovative, but because it was willing to do what others wouldn't: refine rare earths using toxic chemicals, subsidize unprofitable mines for strategic gain, accept environmental damage in exchange for leverage. Slowly, quietly, China didn't just mine resources, it controlled the choke points. By the time Washington realized what had happened, China processed over 60% of rare earths, over 70% of battery materials, a massive share of critical minerals used in defense. America still designs the future, but China increasingly controls the materials that make that future possible. And that's a dangerous position for any superpower. Imagine this scenario. Tensions spike in the Taiwan Strait. Sanctions fly back and forth. Global markets panic. And then China does something subtle. It doesn't fire a missile. It doesn't block a port. It restricts exports. Suddenly, battery prices surge. EV production stalls. Defense contractors miss deadlines. Inflation spikes again. No bombs. No invasion. Just economic pressure. This is why minerals are no longer just commodities. They are weapons. And America needs a counterweight. Not tomorrow. Not in 10 years. Now, look at a map. Australia sits at the crossroads of the Indo-Pacific, far from China's coast, surrounded by ocean, rich beyond belief in natural resources, and critically, stable democracy, deep intelligence ties with the US, decades-long military cooperation. Australia isn't just friendly, it's predictable. And in geopolitics, predictability is priceless. Beneath Australia's soil lies the world's largest lithium reserves, significant rare earth deposits, uranium for nuclear energy, iron ore that feeds global industry. This is why American policymakers are paying attention, not loudly, not publicly, but relentlessly. For years, Australia tried to balance security with the US, trade with China. China became Australia's largest trading partner. Billions flowed in. Then came the breaking point. Australia questioned China's behavior, pushed back diplomatically, called for accountability. Beijing responded with economic punishment, tariffs, trade bans, pressure campaigns. It was a message. Dependence has consequences. Australia got the message. And so did Washington. When AUKUS was announced, headlines focused on submarines, nuclear-powered submarines. But submarines are just the surface. AUKUS is about industrial integration, technology sharing, long-term military logistics ban, strategic depth. For the United States, Australia becomes a secure production base, a logistics hub, a fallback position if Asia destabilizes premiers. For Australia, AUKUS means massive defense spending, economic transformation, permanent alignment with US strategy. This is not a temporary alliance. It's a generational commitment. Let's talk dollars. For Australia, AUKUS will cost hundreds of billions over decades. That's schools not built, infrastructure delayed, budgets stretched. But it also creates high-paying jobs, advanced manufacturing, a defense-driven industrial base. For the United States, the cost is quieter. Technology transfer, training, shipyard upgrades. But the payoff is enormous. A trusted partner doing heavy lifting. So America doesn't have to do everything alone. This is economic burden sharing, not charity. Here's the part few politicians say out loud. By turning Australia into a fortress, America is also turning it into a target. If conflict ever erupts, Australia will not be neutral, and Australians know this. Quietly, debates are growing. Is the cost too high? Is sovereignty being traded for security? Is Australia becoming too dependent on America? This is the price of strategic relevance, because this story isn't about Australia. It's about you, your cost of living, your energy prices, your job security, your country's future. If America fails to secure supply chains, everything gets more expensive. Everything becomes more fragile. Australia is one of the few places where America can rebuild control without fighting a war. In the 20th century, America's power came from factories and oil. In the 21st century, it comes from minerals and alliances. Australia may look far away, but in the quiet deserts of Western Australia and the shipyards along its southern coast, the future of American power is being decided, not with speeches, not with flags, but with contracts, cranes, and cargo ships. Australia is no longer just an ally. It is becoming America's fortress in the Pacific, and the world is watching. If you strip away the speeches, the flags, the submarines, this entire story comes down to what's underground. Because the next phase of global power will not be decided by who has the biggest army, but by who controls the materials that power the modern world. And this is where Australia quietly becomes indispensable. Western Australia alone holds some of the richest lithium deposits on Earth. Not just enough to supply Australia, enough to supply the world. And lithium is only the beginning. Nickel, cobalt, rare earth elements. These materials don't make headlines, but without them, nothing else works. No EV revolution, no renewable grid, no advanced weapons systems, no AI infrastructure. In simple terms, whoever controls these materials controls the speed and direction of the global economy. And right now, America is racing to make sure China doesn't control all of it. Here's a truth most people don't realize. Mining is only half the story. The real power lies in processing. You can dig lithium out of the ground, but turning it into battery-grade material requires massive chemical plants, specialized knowledge, decades of trial and error. China spent 30 years building this capacity. America didn't. So even if Australia supplies raw materials, there's still a dangerous bottleneck. That's why AUKUS and mineral cooperation are linked. The goal isn't just mining. It's building an entire parallel supply chain outside China's reach. That takes time, that takes money, and that takes political will. This is not a short game. This is a generational reset. Let's talk about where the money is really going. When headlines say billions for defense or hundreds of billions for submarines, what they really mean is shipyards expanding, ports being upgraded, roads, railways, and power grids being reinforced, are entire regions being redesigned around defense and minerals. In Australia, towns that were once sleepy mining hubs are becoming strategic assets. In the United States, defense contractors aren't just selling weapons, they're exporting systems, standards, and control. This is how empires operate in the modern age, not through colonization, but through integration. From the outside, Australia still looks the same. Beaches, cities, a relaxed lifestyle, but under the surface, the country is changing. Defense spending is becoming a permanent feature of the budget. Universities are training engineers for military-industrial roles. Infrastructure decisions are being filtered through one question: Does this strengthen our strategic position? Australia is no longer just planning for prosperity. It's planning for resilience under pressure. That mindset shift is irreversible. Once a country restructures itself around security, there is no going back to normal. From Washington's perspective, the logic is cold but clear. If conflict erupts in Asia, Japan is exposed. Korea is exposed. Taiwan is exposed. Australia is not. It is far enough to survive the opening shock, close enough to matter. That makes Australia the perfect logistics hub, repair center, industrial fallback. In military terms, it's called strategic depth. In economic terms, it's insurance. America is buying time, but here's the fear that hangs over everything. What if this strategy works too well? What if China sees the writing on the wall and decides it cannot wait? History shows us something uncomfortable. When rising powers feel boxed in, they don't always wait patiently. They act. This is why every lithium mine, every submarine contract, every infrastructure upgrade adds not just security, but tension. Australia becomes safer. The world becomes more unstable. For Australia, the choice feels increasingly binary. Option 1, remain neutral. Risk economic coercion. Hope conflict never comes. Option 2, align fully with the United States. Accept the cost. Accept the risk. Australia chose certainty over ambiguity, but certainty has a price. Australians know that if conflict erupts, their country will not be a bystander. It will be involved, whether it wants to be or not. This is the unspoken weight of AUKUS. Here's why this isn't just a foreign policy story. If America fails to secure minerals, inflation becomes permanent, energy transitions stall, military readiness weakens, your cost of living rises, your government's options shrink. Australia is not a distant ally. It is part of the invisible system that keeps modern American life functioning. There is a moment in every great strategy when turning back becomes impossible. For Australia and the United States, that moment may already have passed. The money has been committed. The infrastructure is being built. The supply chains are shifting. This is no longer preparation. It is execution. And once execution begins, the world adjusts accordingly. One of the most dangerous assumptions in geopolitics is believing that your rival is passive. China is not watching AUKUS from the sidelines. It is responding methodically, quietly, and with long memory. While headlines focus on submarines and alliances, Beijing is playing a different game. A slower game. A deeper game. China understands something very clearly. You don't need to defeat America militarily if you can outlast it economically. So instead of reacting loudly, China is doing what it does best. It's adjusting the system. China's response doesn't look like retaliation. It looks like regulation. New export controls, environmental inspections, licensing requirements. On paper, it's bureaucracy. In reality, it's leverage. When China restricts rare earth exports, it doesn't announce it as punishment. It frames it as safety, sustainability, national security. The effect is the same. Supply tightens, prices rise, Western companies scramble. This is pressure without fingerprints, and it works. China isn't just reacting in Asia, it's expanding elsewhere. Africa, South America, Central Asia, wherever minerals exist, China is already there. Buying stakes, building refineries, training local workforces. So even if Australia supplies raw materials, China can still influence global pricing. This is why Washington is uneasy. Breaking dependence on China is not just about one country, it's about an entire ecosystem. Here's where the story turns darker. As supply chains split, the global economy becomes less efficient. That means higher costs, more volatility, less margin for error. In the short term, everyone pays more. Consumers feel it first. Electric cars become more expensive. Energy transitions slow down. Inflation sticks around longer than expected. This is the hidden cost of strategic competition. Freedom is expensive. China doesn't need to fire a shot to send a message. More naval exercises, more patrols, more aircraft near contested zones. Each move calibrated, each move ambiguous. Not enough to trigger war, enough to remind everyone who's watching. Australia notices, so does Japan, so does the US. The Pacific becomes louder, but no one fires. Yet, from Beijing's perspective, the picture looks different. AUKUS, Quad, closer US, Japan ties, Philippines reopening bases. To China, this looks like containment. History matters here. Great powers that feel encircled don't wait forever. This doesn't mean war is inevitable, but it does mean risk is rising. And risk changes behavior. Australia can no longer hide behind distance. Its ports, its mines, its shipyards, all are now part of strategic calculations. Foreign investment scrutiny increases. Cybersecurity becomes a national obsession. Public debates grow louder. Australia is adjusting to a new identity. Not just a country, but a node in a global power struggle. Washington projects confidence. But behind closed doors, there is unease. Can America really rebuild supply chains fast enough? Can voters tolerate higher prices? Can alliances hold under pressure? Because here's the risk. If economic pain becomes too visible, public support erodes. And strategy without public support eventually collapses. This is the knife's edge. Build too little, and you look weak. Build too much, and you look threatening. AUKUS walks this line every day. Is it stabilizing the Pacific or accelerating confrontation? There is no clear answer, only probabilities. Every major power shift in history had a moment when everyone felt it, not saw it. Felt it, a sense that the old rules were breaking. We may be in that moment now. Ships being built, contracts signed, supply chains rerouted. No explosions, just pressure building. Every grand strategy eventually reaches a crossroads. Not a single moment, not a dramatic event, but a quiet realization that the path forward has narrowed. For the United States and Australia, there are now only 3 possible futures. Not theoretical futures, real ones. And which one becomes reality depends on decisions being made right now, far from public view. In this future, the strategy succeeds. Australia's mineral output expands. Processing capacity grows outside China. Supply chains stabilize. China sees the cost of confrontation rising, not because of fear, but because of math. Too many risks, too many unknowns, too much to lose. So competition continues, but below the threshold of war. Trade adapts. Prices normalize. The world slowly adjusts to a divided but stable system. Australia becomes exactly what Washington hoped. A fortress. Not to fight wars, but to prevent them. This is the future policymakers quietly aim for. In the second future, there is no war, but there is no peace either. Supply chains split permanently. Costs stay high. Growth slows. Consumers feel it year after year. Electric vehicles remain expensive. Energy transitions stall. Governments struggle to explain why life feels harder. Political pressure builds. Populism rise. Alliance strain. Australia is secure, but under constant economic stress. America remains powerful, but less flexible. This is the future where nothing explodes, but everything feels brittle. The third future is the one no one wants to talk about. Not because it's impossible, but because it's too possible. A crisis escalates too quickly. A signal is misread. A line is crossed unintentionally. Suddenly, infrastructure matters. Ports, shipyards, mines. Australia's strategic value becomes its vulnerability. In this future, the fortress holds, but the cost is staggering, and the lesson arrives too late. History teaches us something uncomfortable. Strategies don't fail because they are evil. They fail because they assume perfect control. No friction, no emotion, no mistakes. But the real world is messy. Leaders misjudge. Public opinion shifts. Economies stumble. The success of AUKUS and Australia's transformation depends on something fragile: patience. And patience is rare in democracies. For Australia, the question is deeply human. What does it mean to trade comfort for relevance, to accept risk so others can sleep easier? Australia didn't seek this role. It grew into it, pulled by geography, by resources, by a changing world. Australians now live with a quiet understanding. Their country matters more than ever, and that comes with consequences. For Americans, the question is different. How much are you willing to pay to stay ahead? Not just in dollars, but in complexity, in uncertainty, in global responsibility, because rebuilding supply chains means higher costs today to avoid catastrophe tomorrow. Australia is part of that trade-off. A distant land, quietly carrying weight on America's behalf. There will be no victory parade, no surrender ceremony. The mineral war will continue quietly, in contracts, in regulations, in infrastructure projects. Most people will never notice, but the effects will shape prices, jobs, national security. For decades, picture this: a lithium mine in Western Australia. At sunrise, no soldiers, no flags, just machines moving earth. Somewhere else, a shipyard hums, steel, welding sparks, quiet precision, no speeches, no headlines. And yet, this is where the future is being built. The fate of American power will not be decided in one battle. It will be decided in places like this, slowly, deliberately, almost invisibly. Australia may still feel far away, but in the story of the 21st century, it is no longer peripheral. It is central, not just as an ally, not just as a supplier, but as something far more consequential. America's fortress in the Pacific, and whether that fortress becomes a mine, a shield, or a spark, is a question history has not yet answered. If you want to understand how the world is really changing, don't just watch the headlines. Watch the supply chains. Watch the quiet places. That's where the future always starts. You're watching Money and Economic Currents. See you in the next video.